The phone rang, an insistent shrill that sliced through the heavy silence of my apartment. I hesitated, my heart pounding against my ribs as I recognized the number, an unknown caller, cloaked in anonymity. I picked it up, bracing myself for the worst. "Salazar," a voice rasped, low and haunting. "You need to listen carefully. There's been another one. Another one." The words sent a chill racing down my spine, igniting memories I had desperately tried to bury. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. "Does it matter? You know what's happening in your city. The cult is growing bolder. The body count is rising." The voice continued, urgency lacing each syllable. I swallowed hard. "What cult?" "Christian Purification. They're taking lives in the name of their twisted beliefs. You have to stop them, Javier. You're the only one who can." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the echo of my own heartbeat. The name of the cult struck me like a punch to the gut. I had heard whispers about them, but I had hoped they were just urban legends. Another part of me, however, remembered the case that had haunted me for years, a string of unsolved murders linked to a religious sect that had spiraled into madness. It was the case that had driven me out of the detective business, a case that left a scar on my soul. I grabbed my coat, my mind racing with images of the past. I couldn't let this happen again. I had to investigate. I had to find the truth. The streets of the city were cloaked in twilight as I made my way to the site of the latest murder. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the lingering chill of an impending storm. The alley where the victim had been found was shrouded in shadows, the flickering streetlights above casting ominous shapes on the ground. As I stepped into the alley, my stomach twisted with apprehension. A dark stain still marred the ground, a macabre reminder of the violence that had unfolded here. I knelt down, fingers grazing the earth, and my eyes widened as I spotted symbols drawn in the dirt. They were unfamiliar, yet somehow eerily familiar, sparking a memory I couldn't quite grasp. "Why, Javier?" I whispered to myself, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. "Why can't you just let it go?" I rose to my feet, shaking off the darkness that threatened to consume me. I needed to see the body. The police wouldn't let anyone near without proper clearance, but I had my ways. I slipped into the back entrance of the morgue, a place I had visited too many times before. The cold air inside was suffocating as I approached the examination room. The metal table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I steeled myself, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The coroner looked up, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing here, Salazar? I need to see the latest victim. I have to know what happened," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. He hesitated, then nodded. "Just this once. But you didn't hear it from me." The body lay before me, a woman in her 30s, her lifeless form stark against the sterile backdrop. A chill ran through me as I noticed the mark on her arm, a symbol I recognized from my past. It was the same emblem that had haunted my nightmares, a mark that had appeared on the victims of that unsolved case years ago. I leaned closer, studying the intricate designs etched into her skin. "What were you involved in?" I murmured, feeling a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. The woman had been a prominent member of the cult. Had she crossed a line? Or had she simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time? The coroner cleared his throat, pulling me from my thoughts. "You know this isn't just a simple murder, right? There's something deeper going on here." "I know," I replied, my mind racing. "This cult, they're not just a group of fanatics, they're dangerous." As I left the morgue, the weight of the investigation settled heavily on my shoulders. The shadows of my past were creeping closer, and I knew I had to confront them if I wanted to uncover the truth. The city was drenched in darkness, and I was about to dive headfirst into its depths. The dusty air of the old library hung thick around me as I navigated the narrow aisles, my fingers trailing over the spines of forgotten tomes. Each book seemed to whisper secrets of a past long buried, but I was searching for something specific, a hint, a clue, anything that could lead me closer to the truth behind the murders. I paused before a shelf filled with leather-bound volumes, their spines cracked and faded. My heart raced at the thought of what I might find. After scanning the titles, I pulled out a thick book that seemed to call to me. The cover was embossed with gold lettering, Rituals of Purification in Christian Sects. My pulse quickened as I opened it, its pages yellowed and brittle. But as I flipped through, I realized that many of the pages were torn, the words rendered indecipherable. Frustration bubbled within me, but I pressed on. One particular passage caught my eye. It hinted at a purification rite, a cleansing of sins through extreme measures. God, if only you could speak to me now, I muttered, half in jest, half in desperation. Suddenly, a voice interrupted my thoughts. Looking for something specific? I turned to see an elderly librarian watching me from behind her desk, her spectacles perched on the edge of her nose. I'm just researching, I replied, trying to sound casual. She narrowed her eyes, studying me for a moment before nodding. You're not the first to inquire about that book. It's quite popular among those interested in local cults. Cults? I echoed, my curiosity piqued. What do you mean? People come here seeking the truth about the cult of purification. They believe it holds the key to understanding the recent events in town. I felt a chill run down my spine. What events? The murders, she said simply, her gaze unwavering. They're tied to the cult, you know. I nodded, my mind racing as I thought about the last victim, an influential member of that very group. Thanks for the insight, I said, slipping the book under my arm. I needed to find Isabella, the ex-member who might shed more light on this chilling mystery. The sun was setting as I made my way to the cafe where I had arranged to meet Isabella. The warm hues of twilight contrasted sharply with the cold dread in my chest. I pushed the door open and felt the familiar scent of coffee and pastries wrap around me, momentarily easing my tension. Javier, Isabella greeted me, her expression cautious as she gestured for me to sit. I found something, I said, pulling the book from my bag. It's about the cult and their rituals. She leaned closer, her interest piqued. What did you learn? They believe in a purification rite that involves severe penance. It's extreme, and it seems to have a direct connection to the murders. Her eyes widened. That's dangerous knowledge, Javier. The cult won't take kindly to anyone digging into their practices. I need to know more, I pressed. You were part of it. You must have seen something. Isabella hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the rim of her coffee cup. I didn't see much. They kept the real rituals secret, but I heard whispers. They talk about a list, people they deem impure. Who's on this list? I don't know for sure. She bit her lip, fear flickering across her face. But I heard my name mentioned before I left. They see me as a traitor. A shiver ran down my spine. I can't let them continue this. We need to find out who else is involved. She nodded, determination replacing the fear in her eyes. We should follow them, see where they gather. I think I know where they might be holding their next meeting. I felt a surge of adrenaline as we left the cafe, the night air cool against my skin. As we drove towards the outskirts of town, the weight of our mission settled heavily on my shoulders. The thought that I was stepping into the heart of darkness once again was both terrifying and exhilarating. Do you really think we can stop them? Isabella asked, breaking the silence as we approached a secluded area surrounded by trees. We have to try, I replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly. For the victims, for everyone they've hurt. As we parked in a hidden spot, I could hear faint sounds in the distance, singing, chanting, a haunting melody that sent chills down my spine. I glanced at Isabella, and we exchanged a look of resolve before stepping into the shadows, ready to uncover the secrets that lay ahead. The night air was thick with tension as I crouched behind a cluster of trees, my heart pounding in rhythm with the distant chants that floated through the darkness. The flickering light of torches illuminated the clearing, casting eerie shadows against the backdrop of ancient stone ruins. I could see figures moving in a circle, their heads bowed and arms raised, lost in a trance that both fascinated and horrified me. This was it, the moment I had been both dreading and yearning for. I squinted, trying to make sense of the gathered crowd. Their faces were obscured by the flickering flames, but I could make out the long, flowing robes they wore, each adorned with symbols that sent chills down my spine. It was then that I noticed the leader, a man I had seen in town, a respected member of the community. He was standing at the center, his presence commanding and ominous. As he lifted his arms, I caught a glimpse of a familiar mark on his palm. The same symbol I had seen on the arm of the last victim. My stomach churned as the pieces began to click together. "This can't be happening," I muttered under my breath, the realization hitting me like a freight train. I had stumbled into something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. What was this ritual, and why did it seem to revolve around that damned symbol? My instinct urged me to retreat, to escape before I was discovered, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. Suddenly, the leader's voice boomed through the night. "Tonight, we gather to purify our souls." His words rang with a fervor that sent shivers down my spine. "We shall cast out the darkness that plagues this town." The crowd responded with a chorus of amens, their voices rising in a chilling harmony that echoed through the trees. I felt a sharp intake of breath beside me. Isabella, the ex-member of the cult, had found me. "Javier, we need to go. They'll see us," she hissed urgently, her eyes wide with fear. "No, I need to know more," I insisted, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is connected to everything. To the murders, to my past, to my own demons." Isabella shook her head, panic etched on her face. "You don't understand. They're dangerous. They see everything. We can't take the risk." In that moment, I spotted something out of the corner of my eye. A figure breaking from the circle, eyes scanning the surroundings. I instinctively pulled Isabella down, my heart racing. We held our breath as the figure drew closer, and I felt the weight of 1,000 secrets pressing down on my chest. "Javier," the figure called out, and my heart dropped. It was one of the members I had seen earlier, and he was looking right at us. "What are you doing here?" I cursed under my breath, my mind racing. "Run," I urged Isabella, but it was too late. The man turned, his eyes narrowing in recognition. You're the one they've been talking about," he shouted, voice rising above the chants. "You're not supposed to be here." Without thinking, I bolted, dragging Isabella along with me. We dashed through the trees, adrenaline fueling our escape. Behind us, I could hear the rustle of robes and footsteps pounding against the ground. The chanting had morphed into chaos, and I knew we had to put distance between ourselves and that gathering. As we reached the edge of the clearing, I stumbled, nearly losing my balance. "What the hell was that?" I gasped, glancing back to see if we were being followed. Isabella looked breathless, her face pale. "They'll come for us. We need to find a way to stop them, Javier. They have something planned." I nodded, my mind racing. I need to connect the dots. There must be something in the old city records, something that ties this all together. As we caught our breath, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The revelation that I was now a target, that my name had been whispered in that cult, sent chills down my spine. I had to dig deeper, unravel this web of madness before it consumed me entirely. The air was thick with tension as I approached the familiar street corner where Miguel, my childhood friend and now a police officer, stood. I hadn't seen him in years, but the weight of our shared past hung over us like a dark cloud. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward the very heart of the corruption I was starting to unearth. "Miguel," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned, his face lighting up for a brief moment before morphing into a mask of concern. "Javier, what are you doing here?" he asked, glancing around as if hoping no one would overhear us. "I need your help," I said, stepping closer. "There's something sinister happening in the city, murders connected to that cult." He hesitated, the lines on his forehead deepening. "You shouldn't get involved with them, Javier. You know how dangerous they are. The department is compromised." I clenched my fists, frustration boiling under my skin. "I don't care about the risks. People are dying, and I have to do something. I think the police are turning a blind eye, maybe even worse." Miguel's expression hardened. "You think I don't know that? I've seen things, Javier. Good officers getting pushed out, evidence disappearing. The higher-ups are in their pockets." My heart raced, the implications of his words crashing over me like a wave. "What do you mean? Who's involved?" He looked around again, lowering his voice. "You remember Captain Ruiz? He's been acting strange lately, receiving packets from the cult under the guise of donations. It's all a facade. They're buying control, and no one is safe." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Ruiz? But he was supposed to be one of the good guys." "Everyone has a price," Miguel replied bitterly. "Even him, and if you keep digging, they might come after you." "I can handle myself." I insisted, though the truth was that I was teetering on the edge of my own sanity. Every step deeper into this investigation seemed to pull me further into a web of darkness that I had tried to escape for years. He studied me, concern mixed with something else, fear, perhaps. "Javier, you need to be careful. They have eyes everywhere. You need to." Before he could finish, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. An unknown number. My stomach knotted. "Who is it?" Miguel asked, noticing my reaction. "I don't know," I said, answering the call with a shaky hand. "Hello?" A distorted voice came through, dripping with malice. "You're getting too close, Javier. Back off, or you'll regret it." My heart pounded in my chest, and I ended the call, my hands trembling. I looked at Miguel, fear etched across my face. "They know I'm investigating." He stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. "You have to stop, for your own safety. This is not a game." "I can't stop now. Not when I'm this close to the truth. I can't let them win," I replied fiercely, though the doubt gnawed at me. Miguel sighed, frustration evident in his eyes. "Then at least let me help you. I can keep an eye on things from the inside. Just promise me you'll be careful." I nodded, though the weight of my past loomed large. "I promise, but I need you to be honest with me. Is there anyone else in the department I can trust?" He shook his head. "Not that I know of. It's getting worse every day. Just remember, Javier, the cult isn't just about faith, they're about power. And power doesn't shy away from blood." I swallowed hard, the gravity of his words sinking in. The thought of the cult's influence spreading like a disease made my skin crawl. "Stay safe," Miguel said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "And keep your head down." As I walked away from him, the shadows of the city seemed to close in around me. I had a deep-seated feeling that I was being watched, that the cult's grip extended far beyond what I could see. The fear that coursed through my veins was suffocating, but I couldn't turn back now. I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The air felt heavier as I stumbled upon the documents hidden in the dusty corner of my mother's attic. A dim light flickered above me, casting shadows that danced across the walls, almost mocking my search for the truth. I had been piecing together a puzzle that seemed to grow more complex with every revelation. Each name I uncovered echoed in my mind like a haunting whisper, binding me tighter to the past I had tried so desperately to escape. Flipping through the fragile, yellowed pages, I stumbled upon a name that sent a chill down my spine. My father. There it was, in black and white, the evidence of his connections to the cult that had been terrorizing the city. My heart raced as I read the words, "Member since 1975. It was as if the walls around me were closing in, suffocating me with the weight of my own history. Why didn't I know? I muttered to myself, gripping the edge of the table to steady my shaking hands. I couldn't bear to be alone with this information any longer. I had to confront my mother. Perhaps she held the key to understanding why my father had been involved in such darkness. As I descended the creaky stairs, I could feel the tension building within me. I found her in the kitchen, her back turned as she washed the dishes, the rhythmic clinking of porcelain contrasting sharply with the storm brewing inside me. "Mom," I called, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to apprehension. "We need to talk." "What is it, Javier?" she asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You look troubled." I took a deep breath, the words fighting to escape my lips. "I found some documents about Dad, about the cult." I watched as her face paled, her hands faltering in the soapy water. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She sighed heavily, turning away to wipe her hands on a towel. "There are things you don't understand, Javier. Your father, he was trying to protect us." "Protect us?" I echoed incredulously. "By getting involved with a group that sacrifices innocent people? Do you even realize what's happening out there?" My heart raced, the anger boiling beneath my skin. "Stop it. You don't know what it was like," she snapped, her voice rising with frustration. "Your father thought he could change things from the inside. He believed in redemption, in the power of faith." "Faith?" I scoffed, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "This isn't about faith. It's about manipulation and bloodshed. Don't you see that?" She turned to face me, her expression a mix of pain and resolve. "And what do you want me to say? That I knew he was involved? That I could have stopped him?" "I was scared, Javier. I was scared of what they might do to us." my fists clenched at my sides. "You should have told me the truth. Maybe then I wouldn't be caught in this web of lies and violence." "I was trying to protect you," she said softly, her voice cracking. "The cult, they have eyes everywhere. I didn't want you to get involved, to end up like your father." The weight of her words settled heavily in the air between us. "But I already am involved," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm already in this mess, and now I'm uncovering things I wish I could forget." A silence enveloped the room, thick with unspoken truths. I could see the tears welling in her eyes, glistening like the shards of my childhood memories. "I'm sorry, Javier. I didn't want this for you." "Neither did I replied, my voice trembling. "But if there's any chance that I can stop this cult, I need to know everything. I need to understand what I'm up against." She took a deep breath, the weight of my request hanging in the air. "There are things I've kept hidden. Things I wish someone had told me sooner. But if you're determined to face them, you need to be prepared for the truth." "Tell me," I urged, desperation clawing at my throat. "I need to know what really happened." She nodded slowly, her resolve strengthening. "All right, but you must promise me, Javier, that you'll be careful. The lines between right and wrong are blurred in this world, and you may not like what you find. Just tell me," I insisted, ready to plunge into the depths of our family's past, whatever darkness it held. The air was thick with anticipation as I stood at the entrance of the dimly lit room, the flickering candles casting elongated shadows that danced along the walls. The scent of burning incense mixed with something metallic, a scent I recognized all too well. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, each beat echoing the unsteady rhythm of my thoughts. This was it. I was about to plunge deeper into the abyss I had feared for so long. "Welcome, Javier." A voice came from behind me, smooth and unnervingly calm. I turned to see a familiar face, Isabella, her eyes wide with a mixture of urgency and fear. "You shouldn't have come here alone." "I had no choice. They're expecting me," I replied, my voice firm despite the unease gnawing at my insides. I glanced around, noticing the other members of the cult lining the walls, their faces obscured by dark hoods. The atmosphere was electric, charged with an energy that felt almost palpable. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, though my stomach churned at what lay ahead. I have to know what they want from me. As we moved further into the room, I was struck by the sight of a makeshift altar at the far end, adorned with crude symbols and offerings that reminded me of the cult's dark history. The leader, a man I had seen before, his face shrouded in shadows, stood at the altar, a sinister smile playing on his lips as he beckoned me closer. "Tonight, we initiate you into the true path of purification," he said, his voice resonating with authority. "You will confess your sins, and in doing so, you will cleanse your soul." A wave of dread washed over me. Confession was not just a formality. It was a revelation of my darkest secrets. "What if I refuse?" I challenged, my defiance a shield against the vulnerability I felt. "Refusal is not an option," he replied, his tone chilling. "You are already chosen, Javier. Embrace your fate." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to step forward. The others began to chant softly, their voices merging into a haunting melody that tugged at my conscience. I could feel their eyes upon me, watching, waiting for my confession. "All right," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'll confess." The leader smiled wider, his satisfaction palpable. "Good, begin." I hesitated, my mind racing back to that fateful night, the one that had haunted me for years. I was a detective. I failed to save someone. A girl. My voice faltered as the memories flooded back. I didn't arrive in time. She died because I wasn't fast enough. The murmurs among the cult members grew louder, a mixture of approval and anticipation. "What else?" the leader urged, leaning closer, hunger in his eyes. "I was reckless. I thought I could control everything, but I was wrong," I continued, the weight of my guilt pressing down on me like a physical burden. "I lost everything because of my arrogance." "Let it go," Isabella whispered, stepping closer to me. "You're stronger than this." But her words only fueled the fire of my shame. I let my partner take the blame for my mistakes. I ruined his life, and I never even apologized. The leader nodded, his expression one of twisted delight. "You see, Javier, your confession brings you closer to the truth. But it's not enough. You must confront what lies beneath these sins." The chanting escalated, a crescendo that drowned out my thoughts. In that moment, I felt the walls closing in, the shadows creeping closer. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice cracking under the pressure. "Your sins are a part of you, Javier, but you have the chance to redeem yourself," the leader said, his voice smooth as silk. "Tonight, you will become one with the cult. You will be reborn." As he gestured towards the altar, I felt an overwhelming urge to run, to escape this nightmare. But something held me in place. Perhaps it was the desperate hope for absolution, or the fear of what might happen if I turned my back on them. "Together we will face the final trial," Isabella said, her determination shining through the haze of fear. "We'll get through this, I promise." I looked into her eyes, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope. But it was quickly extinguished as the leader raised his arms, the cult members echoing his movements, their chants reaching a fever pitch. "Prepare yourself, Javier. The ritual of purification is about to begin." In that instant, I realized that I was not just confronting my past. I was stepping into a future laden with uncertainty, where every choice could lead to salvation or destruction. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the secluded clearing, the ambience felt both eerie and electric. I stood there, the weight of my mission pressing heavily on my shoulders. The sound of drums echoed through the trees, a rhythmic pulse that matched the racing of my heart. Isabella was at my side, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Javier, we have to stop them," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the drumming. "If we don't, who knows what will happen tonight?" "I know," I replied, swallowing hard as I scanned the clearing. The cult was gathered in a tight circle, their faces obscured beneath hoods, their bodies swaying in unison. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the anticipation radiating from them. "But we need a plan. We can't just rush in." Isabella nodded, her gaze fixed on a figure at the center of the circle. "That's him," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The leader. He has to be stopped." I focused on the man, his presence commanding and sinister. He held a staff adorned with symbols I had seen before, the same ones I had found at the murder scenes. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the depth of their beliefs. They were preparing for something monumental, something that would change everything. As the chanting began, I felt the air shift. It was no longer just a gathering, it felt like a storm was brewing. "What do you think they're planning?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Something involving sacrifice," Isabella replied, her face paling. "They believe it will purify the world. They think they need a chosen one." A lump formed in my throat. What if that chosen one is me? "Javier, you can't let them take you. You have to fight back," she urged, her eyes pleading. "I have to find out the truth first. They're not just going to let me walk in there and ask questions." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. "I'll create a distraction. You stay back and look for a way to gather evidence." She hesitated, her brow furrowing. "What if you get caught? Then you get out of here and expose them," I said firmly, trying to instill some confidence in her. "This is bigger than us. We can't let them continue." As I edged closer to the gathering, the drums picked up speed, matching the rapid beat of my heart. The chanting grew louder and more fervent, a haunting melody that resonated deep within me. I took another step forward, feeling the eyes of the cultists on me. Suddenly, I was spotted. "Intruder!" someone shouted, and the chanting stopped abruptly. The air grew thick with tension as the members turned to face me, their faces hidden beneath the shadows of their hoods. "Run, Javier!" Isabella shouted, but I stood my ground. "I'm not here to fight," I called out, raising my hands in surrender. "I just want to talk." The leader stepped forward, his voice smooth and commanding. "You think you can just walk into our sacred space and demand answers? You are a fool." "Am I?" I shot back, my voice steady despite the fear swirling within me. "You're the ones hiding behind masks, clinging to a twisted belief. I know what you're planning." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and I could see the anger flash in the leader's eyes. "You know nothing, Javier. You are a part of this, whether you like it or not. You are meant to fulfill a role." "A role? What role?" I pressed, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you want from me?" The leader leaned in closer, a sinister smile creeping across his face. "You are the chosen sacrifice, the key to our purification. You cannot escape your fate." My mind raced as I processed his words. "You think I'll just let you do this?" I spat, anger rising within me. "You're wrong." "Foolish man," he sneered, stepping back to give the order. "Seize him." Panic surged through me as I turned to run, but I stumbled, the ground uneven beneath my feet. My breath came in quick gasps as I darted through the trees, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I could hear the cultists behind me, their footsteps pounding the earth, their shouts echoing in the darkness. "Isabella," I called, hoping she was safe. My thoughts raced as I tried to find a way to escape, to prevent this madness from consuming me. But deep down, I knew I was entangled in something far more sinister. I stood on the edge of the crumbling cliff, overlooking the sprawling city below, my heart racing. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets, a perfect metaphor for the darkness I was about to confront. My mind raced as I thought of the cult and their impending ritual. I had to find a way to expose them before it was too late. "Isabella," I whispered to myself, remembering her grave expression when she warned me about the cult's intentions. "I need to find that secret file." The weight of the revelations pressed down on me like a lead blanket. I had spent weeks piecing together the connections, and now I was on the brink of uncovering the truth that could bring down the cult and possibly save myself. I recalled the chilling words of the cult leader, a man who had manipulated more lives than I could count. "You are the key to our purification, Javier. You don't even know how deep your ties run." Those words echoed in my mind as I made my way back to the old church where the cult operated. I had to get inside their headquarters and find evidence that would expose their sinister plans. As I approached the building, my palms grew sweaty. The heavy wooden door creaked as I slipped inside, the dim light casting eerie shapes across the walls. Where would they keep the files? I muttered under my breath. The musty scent of aged wood and wax candles filled the air, amplifying the sense of dread that loomed over me. I tiptoed through the narrow corridors, trying to remain undetected. My heart pounded in my chest as I recalled the faces of the cult members I had seen during my earlier investigation. Would they recognize me? I had to be cautious. Suddenly, I heard voices coming from a nearby room. "Did you hear about the sacrifice?" One voice hissed. "They say it's someone special." "It has to be someone who understands the darkness within," another voice replied, sending chills down my spine. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to calm my breathing. I couldn't let them catch me now. I needed to find that file. The voices faded, and I seized the opportunity to slip through a door marked "Restricted Access." My heart raced as I entered what appeared to be the cult's archives. Rows of shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty boxes and ancient tomes. I scanned the titles, searching for anything that would hold the secrets I needed. "Where is it?" I whispered, frustration mounting. Just then, I spotted a box labeled Purification Records. My breath caught in my throat. I rushed over, yanking it off the shelf and flipping it open. Inside were documents detailing the cult's manipulations, including names, dates, and events that spanned decades. I rifled through the papers, my hands shaking with urgency. "This has to be it," I murmured, pulling out a document that detailed the ties between my family and the cult. My stomach twisted. My father, his name was here. They had used him as a pawn, just as they had tried to use me. Suddenly I heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through me. I had to move. Come on, I urged myself, cramming the documents into my bag. I glanced around, looking for an exit. The exit was at the far end of the room, but I could hear the voices getting closer. "Javier, we need to find him," one of the voices shouted. I recognized it. It was one of the cult leaders. My pulse quickened. They were looking for me. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. "Think, Javier," I hissed under my breath. "You can't get caught now." I spotted a narrow window near the ceiling. It was my only chance. I climbed onto a nearby shelf, my heart racing as I reached for the window. With a grunt, I pulled myself up just as the door burst open. "Check the archives." I heard the leader bark. He must be hiding in here. My stomach sank as I hoisted myself through the window, scraping my arms on the rough edges. I landed outside with a soft thud, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I couldn't stop now. I had the evidence. I just needed to get back to Isabella and expose the cult before it was too late. As shadows danced eerily against the walls of the cult's headquarters, the air thick with an unsettling anticipation. I glanced at Isabella, her eyes wide with fear but resolute. We had made it this far, but the stakes were about to get perilously high. "We have to hurry, Javier," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "If they find us—" I nodded, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The ritual was set to begin soon, and we needed to gather the evidence that could finally bring this nightmare to an end. I pushed down the rising panic, focusing on the task at hand. "Let's split up. It'll be faster," I suggested, trying to mask my own trepidation. "I'll head for the inner office. You check the main hall." "Be careful," she replied, her brow furrowed with concern. I could see the unease in her stance, but she nodded. "Just don't get caught." With one last glance back at her, I slipped into the dimly lit corridor. The walls were adorned with grotesque imagery that made my stomach churn, a twisted celebration of faith and fanaticism. I crept forward, my heart pounding in rhythm with my footsteps. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a siren, announcing my presence. As I neared the back office, I heard muffled voices through the wooden door. I pressed my ear against it, straining to catch snippets of the conversation. "The sacrifice must be flawless," a deep voice commanded, unmistakably that of the cult leader. "Tonight, we will purify this city." My stomach dropped. "They're serious," I muttered under my breath. I needed to get inside and find the evidence. I pushed the door slightly, just enough to slip in without making a sound. The room was cluttered with files, candles flickering ominously. I scanned the room quickly, searching for anything that could help us. Then I saw it, a locked cabinet in the corner. I approached cautiously, my fingers trembling as I fished out a hairpin from my pocket. I had used it before, and I hoped my skills wouldn't fail me now. With focused determination, I worked on the lock, my heart racing as I heard the faint click. I yanked the door open, revealing a treasure trove of documents. My hands shook as I rifled through the files, uncovering names, dates, and the horrifying accounts of manipulation and control. "Javier!" Isabella's urgent whisper cut through the silence, snapping my focus back. My heart dropped as I turned to see her at the door, panic etched across her face. "They're coming!" "Shit!" I cursed under my breath. I shoved the files into my bag, not caring how reckless it was. "We need to go, now!" I grabbed her wrist, and we dashed toward the back exit, my instincts screaming to get us out before we were caught. But just as we reached the hallway, I heard footsteps echoing behind us. "They're here!" I shouted, pushing Isabella ahead of me. "Run!" We sprinted through the winding corridors, the dim light flickering as if mocking our desperate escape. My lungs burned, and I could hear the shouts of cult members behind us, their voices growing closer. "There they are! Don't let them escape!" "Javier, what do we do?" Isabella gasped, glancing back as we turned a corner, the sound of footsteps growing louder. "We need to find a place to hide," I replied, my mind racing. "There's no way we can take them all on." Just ahead, I spotted a small storage room. I pulled her inside, closing the door with a soft click. We pressed our backs against the wall, holding our breath as the footsteps thundered past us. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, heightening my senses. "They'll be searching for us," I murmured, glancing at Isabella. "We have to wait until it's clear." She nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "If we can just get the evidence to the police." "Exactly," I said, trying to calm the storm inside. "I just need a moment to think." Suddenly, the door rattled violently. "They're coming," I hissed. We had seconds before they could find us. I glanced around the room, searching for anything we could use to our advantage. In the corner, an old broom leaned against the wall. "Get ready," I whispered, grabbing it just as the door burst open. They stormed in, and I swung the broom with all my might, catching one of the cult members off guard. "Run!" I yelled to Isabella as chaos erupted. She darted past me, and I followed, adrenaline pushing me forward as we fought our way through the onslaught of cultists. "Back this way," I shouted, leading us toward the exit we had seen before. I could hear the shouts of rage behind us, but we were so close. I could almost taste the freedom. Finally, we burst through the door and out into the night, the cool air hitting my face like a splash of cold water. "We did it!" Isabella gasped, but the relief was short-lived. I knew the danger wasn't over yet. "Not yet," I replied, looking back at the building. We need to get this evidence to the police before they can recover. As we ran toward the safety of the street, I felt the weight of the files pressing against me. They might just be the key to finally bringing this madness to an end. As sirens wailed in the distance, fading in and out like the shadows around me, I was cornered, adrenaline pumping through my veins as I faced the cult leader, a man whose charisma had entrapped so many. His piercing eyes held a glimmer of triumph as he leaned closer, whispering words that felt like daggers. "Did you really think you could save her?" "You're too late, Javier," he sneered, glancing toward Isabella, who stood resolute by my side, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "Shut up," I shouted, my voice echoing in the dimly lit room. "You won't get away with this. The police are on their way." The leader chuckled softly, a sinister sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, they're already here, Javier, but you'll find that they're not here to save you." I could feel the walls closing in, the weight of my past crashing down on me like a tidal wave. Just as I prepared for an inevitable confrontation, the door swung open, revealing a figure that caught my breath. It was Isabella, but she was different somehow. There was a fierceness in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Javier, listen," she called out, her voice cutting through the tension. "There's something you need to know." What could possibly be more important than getting us out of here? I barked back, my heart racing, but then she stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "It's about the leader. He's been lying to you, to us both. You need to understand the truth." In that moment, the world around me faded, and all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. "What truth, Isabella?" I demanded, desperation creeping into my voice. "Tell me." She inhaled deeply, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'm your daughter, Javier. You're my father." The words hit me like a freight train, robbing me of my breath. "What?" I whispered, disbelief twisting my stomach. "That's impossible. My daughter, she's gone." "No," she insisted, stepping closer, her voice trembling with emotion. "I was taken from you, raised in that cult. They told me my father was a monster, that you abandoned me. But I found you, and I came back to help you." I stumbled back, my mind racing. All those years of guilt, of feeling like a failure as a father, suddenly flooded back, but now they were intertwined with a new, raw horror. "Isabella, why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was afraid," she replied, her voice breaking. "Afraid of what it would mean, of how it would change everything. But now we don't have time. We need to stop him together." The cult leader's laughter echoed like a death knell in the background. "How poetic," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "A father and daughter, united in despair. But this is where your story ends, Javier. The ritual must proceed, and one of you will pay the ultimate price." A wave of rage surged through me, mixed with a fierce protectiveness. "You'll never lay a finger on her," I shouted, stepping in front of Isabella, my body tense and ready for battle. "Then you'll die trying," he taunted, raising his hand as if to summon his followers. But before he could act, I felt a surge of clarity. The police were on their way, and I had to buy us time. "You think you control everything, don't you?" I spat, forcing myself to maintain eye contact with him. "But you're wrong. You may have manipulated my life, but you will not dictate my fate or hers." In that critical moment, I glanced at Isabella, my daughter, who stood by my side, her resolve shining through the fear. "We'll take you down together," I said, my voice steady now, filled with newfound strength. As the door burst open, revealing flashing lights and uniforms, the leader's expression shifted from arrogance to rage. "You'll regret this," he yelled, but it was too late. The police flooded in, ready to dismantle the twisted power he held over us. As chaos erupted, I felt a surge of hope. I had to protect Isabella, to finally put an end to the cycle of violence that had plagued us both. But as I stood there, ready to fight, I realized something deeper. It wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about redemption. "Let's finish this," I said to Isabella, my heart racing, knowing that whatever happened next would redefine not only our lives but also the legacy of pain and loss that had haunted me for so long. With her by my side, I felt a flicker of hope ignite in the darkness. Together, we would face whatever came next.